because there's probably a lot of people out there without jobs and they'd be glad to go to work tomorrow, aren't there? So that's always a blessing. When we get into this election season, the things that always come up to the front as being discussion points are what? The unemployment rate and welfare. How much we pay for these things. There's always big topics. And of course, those are great topics for this weekend, aren't they? As we think of Labor Day and being thankful for jobs and so forth. And so today I'm going to talk about a little bit about Labor Day. We're going to talk about 7 principles that relate to work and wages. And as we're thinking about unemployment and work and government work and so forth, did you ever, any of you hear the story about the farmer who was out there sitting, just kind of watching on his porch there one day as his workers came down the road? They stopped at a place by the side of the road, and it was a tree planting crew. And so one guy got out of the truck and he dug the hole. The next guy got out and he dumped a bucket of water on it. And the next guy got out and he filled the hole. And then they went down 50 feet down the road and did the same thing over again. Dug the hole, filled the water, covered the hole, and went on. And the farmer watched him do this 3 or 4 times and says, "What in the world are you guys doing?" He says, "Why are you planting trees?" He says, "I don't see any trees." He says, "Well, yeah, George gets out and he digs the hole, and then John gets out and he puts the water in. And Henry gets out and he puts the tree in, and Joe gets out and he fills the hole. But Henry couldn't come to work today." Boy, you guys are really bad. First one, love that one. Man, I'll tell you, you're a hard crowd, That's why I'm not a comedian, because I can't tell jokes, but I thought that one went over pretty well, But anyway, so we're going to talk about work and wages today, and we're going to talk about 7 principles. The first one I'd like to start off with as we look at the scriptures. If you want to look at Ecclesiastes, it's got a lot of the scriptures there. I'm going to put the scriptures up here so you can read them, a bunch of them, but you have to write them down because I didn't put them on your sheet. So how many people have green sheets? Hold your green sheets up. Got your green sheets? They're in your bulletin, okay? Pull out your green sheet, and you can fill it out as you go along, and I'll give you some principles to think of for the future, but you've got to write all the verses down, at least the references. We're going to start off with the first one, which is work is a God-given responsibility and privilege. Work is a God-given responsibility and privilege. Let's start off with responsibility. You go back to Genesis chapter 2, verses 5 and 15, and it tells us that God placed man here to cultivate the earth, to take care of it. So we have a job to take care of the earth. That's part of what we do. Now, with global warming and, all the different issues that come up with that and, recycling bins and so forth, and we've got people on all sides of the issues, and I'm one that's kind of in the middle in a sense. I think we can be too extreme in one case, but in the other case, we have to really do what we can to take care of our environment. Was out in Oregon for my years as a grad student, and out there, of course, the lumber industry is real big, and that was a big deal. The lumber. Some people think those are bad people, but they're really not. Good lumberers know how to maintain the fields, and they'll go in. They'll only take the bigger trees out. And some of the farmers, in fact, in central Pennsylvania, were like that. They take out trees that were over 12 inches, for instance, and leave everything less than 12 inches, so they could continue to grow. But you got to weed it out. Clear cutting is not a good thing necessarily, unless you're going to build a building there. You try to maintain some sources of replanting efforts, and so you need to watch over that. And I know some places, the forest out there, they found some gnat that was going extinct or something, so whole forest couldn't be touched. And you got to manage this stuff so that it honors God. But that's part of what we're doing here. That was a God-given responsibility of us to work to manage the land. A second responsibility, and in Psalm 8:6 right here that you have on the screen over here head, says that, "Thou dost make him to rule over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his feet." We are to work on those things and to take care of that. The second thing that we need to do is we have a responsibility to provide for our families. That's a responsibility of work. 1 Timothy 5:8 says, "If anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his own household, he's denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever or an infidel." We need to provide for our families, and that's why we have a responsibility to work, to provide an income so we can provide for those who are our own. This particular text in some cases was talking about the widows who were being neglected by other members of the family who could take care of them. And some of those cases came up in Timothy and Thessalonians. But we are to take care of our own. It says in Thessalonians, if you don't work, you don't. And if you don't provide income, you're not going to be able to feed your family. So we need to do that. And that really interacts a little bit with the welfare system today, right? If you don't work, neither let you eat. And they dealt with that back, if you remember, when Bill Clinton was president. The welfare was a big deal, and they put this welfare to work. In fact, the act had a real long name. The Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996, okay? But it meant if you're going to, you can't just stay home and watch TV and say, oh, send me, the money so I can get my food and, take care of my electric bill and everything else. Yeah, there was some responsibility to work when you did it, and that's a good thing. Because if you don't work, you shouldn't eat. So we have a responsibility to work, but it's also a privilege. How many go to work every day and say, well, this is a real privilege to me? How many people say that? A couple of people, yeah. But it's a privilege. When we think of it, there are many people that cannot work. It says in Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 18, for it is He, God, who is giving you power to make wealth. When you go around and say, hey, man, I did pretty good here. I made a good investment, or, I did a good job on the work today and got a good paycheck or whatever, just temper that a little bit with the idea that it is God who gives us the power to make wealth. And there's a lot of people who are sick or have other difficulties and can't do that. And they would be glad to work. So don't think that just because you can work that it's a right. It's not a right. It's a privilege. And it's a God-given privilege for you to be able to do that. And part of the third thing I want to say under this theme of it being a privilege is that there's a benefit of work. It gives a satisfaction and a reward. Now, how many go to work and work for free? Anybody? Anybody work for free? Okay, if you volunteer someplace or whatever, you may be working for free. But most people don't work for free. We work for what? For money, for wages, for a paycheck. So there's a reward to our labor. But there's also a different satisfaction. I mean, have you ever completed a project? I don't know. Maybe you're a computer programmer. You complete the project, and now the screen comes up with all those beautiful things on it, the icons, and everything perfect, Or maybe you're working on a house or rehabbing a project, and you finish the kitchen, and you stand back and say, man, that kitchen looks nice. Or you finish a house, and man, that house looks beautiful. Or maybe it's a farmer that comes in and he's collected his crops and he looks at. There's a satisfaction, not just a reward, but a satisfaction of doing a good job. And that's the benefit that the scriptures talk about. It says in Ecclesiastes 5:12, it says these words, the sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much. But the full stomach of the rich man does not allow him to sleep. Why does the poor man who works a good day and works a hard job and gets finished, why does he sleep? Because not just because he's tired, but there's a certain satisfaction at having done a good day's work and finished a project. So work is a God-given responsibility and a privilege. The second thing we want to learn today is that we should be content with a fair wage for an honest day's work. Be content with a fair wage for an honest day's work. In the scriptures, we have the parable of the husbandman, if you remember, and it's found in Matthew chapter 20, where the guy goes out to hire workers to come into his field. And he hires them all, and he goes out at 8 o'clock in the morning, hires a bunch of guys, goes back at 10 o'clock, and there's still guys sitting there without any work. So he says, okay, go back and work my field, And then he goes back at noon, he does this 3 or 4 times, and goes right an hour before ending day, and there's still guys sitting there. He says, why are you sitting here? And they said, well, we're sitting here because nobody hired us. And he said, go out there, come on, you can work in my field. Go work in my field. They went and worked in the field. After they got finished, the day's work, the guys that started at 8 o'clock came in first, they got their paycheck, and they got paid exactly what they said they would get paid. The guys that started at maybe 10 o'clock, he gave them the same amount. The guys at noon, he gave them the same amount. In fact, he gave the same amount to the guys that started an hour before the end of the workday. And what do you think happened? Yeah. The guys that got finished started at 8 o'clock in the morning says, how come they got paid the same amount as we did? And the owner said, didn't I contract you to work for a certain amount of money? He said, yeah. Didn't I pay you what I said I would pay you? Yeah. Then what are you complaining about? If I want to give somebody else to start to work later a little bit, the same amount, or somebody that worked for only 1 hour the same amount, what's that to you? You contracted for a fair wage for the work's day, and you did it, and I paid you. So we should be content with a fair wage. And as you look at it's interesting because there are soldiers that came to Christ, and you don't get a whole lot of press. I mean, when's the last time you heard them ask someone preach on the soldiers' questions to Jesus Christ? And this is not at the end of his life while he's being killed or anything. This is during his one of his talks, and he told them a number of things. They asked him, "What should we do? How should we live our lives?" And he gave them a number of things they should do, and then he said, "Be content with your wages." Now, maybe those soldiers weren't getting paid as much as they thought. Maybe they were having a little struggle, or maybe they just wanted to know. But Jesus Christ told, "Be content with your wages." That's one of the things he said that we should be doing. And that's the advice he gave to them. So be content, first of all. Second thing, don't be lazy. In Proverbs chapter 6, it has a section that talks about the ant. How many have you ever stood and kind of kneeled down and watched the ants work? Anybody do that? As a kid, have you done that? Without squishing them? I mean, some of us squish them too. That's not good, but, you look at them and you see this ant, he's about this big, and the thing he's carrying is about the same size as his body. Can you imagine me carrying something the same size as me? Well, maybe it was styrofoam, but, that's a lot of work. And Proverbs 6 talks about how organized, how faithful, how diligent the ant is at their work. And he uses it as an example. And the opposite of that example is the sluggard, the guy that's laggard, that's lazy and doesn't do work. He says, be like the ant. Be industrious. Do hard work. You don't see them just kind of, you ever seen an ant just laying around kind of not doing anything? They're always working. And so this is the example he gives. And there's a few other verses that I'd like to point out. As we look in 2 Thessalonians 3:10, we already talked about that. If you don't work, you don't eat. In 1 Corinthians 10:31, it says, whatever you do all to the glory of God. And then the verse that I put up here is Colossians. It says almost the same thing, Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men. Now, I've got a few suggestions for you. First of all, when you work as if God was your employer. God was your employer. He's the one that gave you the job. Secondly, work hard regardless of the pay. You contracted to work for the pay. Work hard. Do it. Don't say, well, if they gave me $2 more an hour, I'd work a little bit harder. We all ought to work hard for our pay. Third, never give less than your best. Never give less. And if any of these resound with you, you may want to write them down. Never give less than your best. Doesn't matter what they're paying, what you're doing, even if it's free, if it's volunteer work, if you're working at home, if you're cleaning out, whatever you're doing, never give less than your best. I mean, some days you feel down, I understand that, but give the best you can on that particular day. Give the best that you have to give. And then lastly, do it with all your might for God's glory. Not for yourself. You're working for God's glory. Work as if he was your employer. One other thing I'd like to say is that we should, if you're in a position of authority or you're an employer, we should treat our subordinates fairly. Treat your subordinates fairly. In 1 Timothy 5:18, and again you can see this verse up here, it says, you should not muzzle the ox while he is threshing, and your labor is worthy of his wages. As an employer, or as a boss, or as a leader, or as a manager in a company, we should manage our subordinates fairly and wisely. In 1 Timothy 5:18, we just read it. In 1 Corinthians 9:7, it says, who at any time serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard does not eat the fruit of it? Who tends a flock and does not use the milk of the flock? So we wind up benefiting from the work we do oftentimes. I sometimes have a problem. I realize we can need people out of house and home, but I think it's nice when you go to work and the boss says, lunch is on me. Or, you can buy things at a discount. I worked at a bookstore for a number of years in high school, and I got a better discount than everyone else, like 10 or I think it was 20 or 30% discount, or maybe it was 10% off the cost. But I was selling the stuff, and so they gave me a little bit of the benefit of what it was there. And so if you're an employer or if you have a subordinate, treat them fairly. Don't say, well, you can look at all that food, but you can't touch any of it, Give them a free soda once in a while or make some sort of a benefit for them. I like what Dave Burkett said. He's with the Lord right now, but he said this, a financial planner. He says, you must either pay someone what he needs to live on or only hire those who can live on what you're able to pay. Let me tell you that again. You must either pay someone what he needs to live on, or only hire those who can live on what you're able to pay. So if you're only able to pay $10 an hour, it's only a $10 an hour job, you hire people who can afford to live on $10 an hour, you know? And if you say, I'll work for $10 an hour, don't say, well, I need more to live on. If you need more to live on, you got to get trained, you got to get experience, you got to work along. Go someplace where you can get $15 an hour, or whatever the price might be. But we have a responsibility as employers. And then lastly, I like this one, Psalm 127:2. It says, it is vain, and this is almost contrary to everything else when you look at this whole section. How do you fit this in? Look at Psalm 127 up there. It says, it is vain for you to rise up early, to retire late, to eat the bread of painful labors. So all of you are saying, well, I might just go home and lay on my bed all day and watch TV, right? Well, the last part of that verse says, as you look at it, it says, for he gives for his beloved even in his sleep. When you work, you see a certain amount of progress in what you do. But don't think that that is looked upon by God as not favorable. He is the one that will work with you and help you in your work. And sometimes he gives you even in your sleep. You may say, I'm not earning enough money. I need some, and while you're sleeping, in some way, he's still looking over you and blessing you in what you do. Understand that God is concerned with how we work. We need to do our best. We need to follow through on these principles. But even when we're sleeping, he can take care of us. I remember, this is not about necessarily work, but it's about school. I remember when I was back in college, I'd go back, and at that time, my dad had a Sunday evening service at their churches, and he was a pastor, and I was the pianist, so I was there every Sunday evening playing piano and going to the Sunday evening service. And I know sometimes I'd get there, and there'd be I know that the next day I had this big paper due, and I had a test. And I'm thinking, all those other college students are home, are back there studying, and I'm here at church. But you know what? I want to honor God. I'm supposed to be, my dad's the pastor and the pianist, so I should be here, but I could probably get out of it, but, let me do it. But then when I finished, it was like, God, I spent this time serving you. Please make up the time in some way, Help me to understand those things on the test or whatever. And who knows? I mean, if I had taken that time and said, I'm going to go study my paper, I could have sat there for 2 hours with a mental block, not being able to think what to write. You ever done that? Ever tried to write something it just doesn't come to you, And that might have happened. So what I would do, especially when it says he gives his beloved in his sleep, my policy was always, right before I went to bed, I read all my notes. Then I went to sleep. And I never got up at 5 and 4 and 3 o'clock in the morning to study. I didn't get up late. I got up at an appropriate time to study again in the morning, but these all-nighters, I didn't pull all-nighters. I studied, I went to sleep. And they say that while you're sleeping, sometimes you're thinking of the last thing you thought of when you went to sleep. And I just hope that during the night, God would help me to remember all the stuff I studied right before I went to sleep. And in the morning, I'd be able to do the test or work on the paper. And he blessed me in many ways. There was one test I really did bad on. I don't want to talk about that test, I don't think I could have studied for that one. It was so hard. But for the most time, I just want you to understand that your work isn't just dependent on what you do. Your work is a relationship based on your God. And even when you're sleeping, he can bless you. The third principle I want to go to is homemaker is a job too. Some people stay at home. Some women have the privilege of staying home. Some have the privilege of working part-time jobs, staying home part-time. Homemaker is a job too. In Psalm 128:3, it says, your wife shall be like a fruitful vine within your house. In Proverbs 6:20, it says, do not forsake the teaching of your mother. They did a research project a few years back, and I pulled it down off the internet. It says this: the stay-at-home moms juggle 94.7 hours of work. They serve as facilities managers, laundry operator, housekeeper, computer operator, cook, daycare teacher, van driver, janitor, psychologist. And if you put all that stuff together in the hours, their pay in a year should be $113,000. And someone in first service said, I'll take that. But how much can you put on the value of someone who's a homemaker? I know in ours, Lois has been able to stay home for most of our career. She worked when I was in seminary, and she's worked at other times in her life. But when you put on the tax form homemaker, she kind of feels like well, that's just stay home. That's not much. But it's great. It's something that's so important. She says, well, I feel like I'd like to contribute to the family in some way, with some money or whatever. And, maybe she'll get a job at Bath & Body. Well, she likes Bath & Body. At least she used to. We talked about it. It was around Christmas. I said, well, if you want to go to Bath & Body because you like working there, you want to get out, you have fun, and you can work at Bath & Body, whatever. But don't go there to earn money. I said, if it's going to be enjoyable for you, but as far as the money goes, you're going to go, they're going to pay you a minimum wage, you have to drive there, you have to drive back, you've got those expenses, you're not at the house, you're going to come home tired. Now you've got to make sure you have the right clothes on, you've got to be all pretty before you go, which is going to take you an hour to get ready. You're going to have to take time when you get back. I mean, by the time you figure out all the time put together and what you're spending, what they're paying you, you're probably going to pay $5 an hour, And I said, you're so much more important than me. I said, if I died, you're going to get a check from my life insurance. And you'll go on and you'll be well set and you won't even miss me. I said, I will miss her. She says, I will. It makes me feel good, I said, but if you died and I got the same amount of money, I couldn't survive. How am I going to pay somebody, find somebody who's going to work and do all the stuff you do? When you could answer everything in the house. I mean, paying the bills for us, taking care of the laundry, taking care of the kids, the homeschooling when we were homeschooling. I mean, how much is it going to cost me to have them tutored? Well, you can send them back to public school. Yeah, I understand, but I mean, it's just so much that she contributes to the family. I couldn't pay anybody to do what she does. So just because you're a homemaker, don't think that that's a low job. It's not a low job. It's a valuable job. And nobody can do it better than you. So if you are able to, some women are not able to. The finances, maybe they're single moms. Sometimes finances are that. But sometimes we put ourselves in that own financial position. We raise our standards to the point that we need the second job, And then when the wife goes to work and all of a sudden she gets sick and she can't go to work, oh, we can't pay the bills. We're a financial disaster, I don't make it sound like I grew up underprivileged. I didn't at all. We were well taken care of, but we were very careful about how we spent money. I remember times when Mom, I got a hole in the bottom of my shoe, Well, let's cut out a piece of cardboard and put it in the bottom of the shoe, And maybe we do that for a week or two till we get the chance to go to the store to buy shoes or whatever. I mean, I don't remember any time I ever put a piece of cardboard in my kids' shoes. It's a different style of living. Did any of you have your parents put cardboard in your shoes when you were little? Okay, I got to see a few handles out there, sure. What's that? Duct taping. Okay, there you go. Duct tape fixes everything. But, our style is differently now. But to get that different lifestyle sometimes, we sacrifice time with the family, time with the kids. Don't ever put yourself down because you're a homemaker. In Titus 2, 4, and 5, it says, encourage the young women to love their husbands, love their children, and be workers at home. And the reason it says that is because it follows on, it says that the word of God may not be dishonored. Homemaking, being, as it says here in the scriptures, workers at home, is something that's complimented by God. So don't ever put yourself down for that. I guess what's most important to you? Your lifestyle or maybe your kids? Sometimes you have to make those choices, and sometimes they're difficult choices. But make sure you're not taking a choice that really is a lesser choice just because you want a little bit more. Homemaking, great job. 4, rest is an important part of work. Rest is most appreciated when you've done a hard day's work. If you work really hard, you go home, boy, there's nothing like sitting in that chair and just feeling relaxed for a little bit, right? Rest is so enjoyed after you've had a hard day's work. In Genesis 2, 1-3, it talks about the fact that God rested after the seventh day. Rest was an important part to him. He set an example for us. Did God need to rest because he got tired? I don't think so. God's omnipotent, he's omniscient, he's omnipresent. I don't think he got tired. I think he's giving an example for us. It was the first thing that he did for us, was give us an example that you need to have rest. And then in Israel, when they were doing the laws, he said, you rest on the seventh day, and then with the land, you rested every seventh year. You let it lay fallow. And today we do crop rotations in order to try to get the same kind of effect. Let it lay fallow in the seventh year. And then they even put and every seventh year was called a Sabbath year, and then every seventh Sabbath year, they had another year off, which was called the year of Jubilee. Rest is important. It's important, and if we don't take it, God will take it back to us sometimes. If you're working 7 days a week, at some point in time, God's going to collect that through illness, through tiredness, and probably the person that takes a seventh day off and really rests is probably going to be so efficient the other 6 days that the two people are going to get the same amount of work done. Just because you work an extra day doesn't mean you get a lot of extra work done. The tiredness, the mental fatigue, the emotional fatigue can affect you the other 6 days. Take your rest and take your vacations. If you have time for a vacation, take it. If you say, well, I don't have money to take a vacation, be creative, Buy a tent, and go tenting someplace, on a campsite. Say, I don't like tenting. Well, I don't like tenting either. We had the privilege one year of I saved every bit of vacation I could, and we took a month. And we traveled the whole United States, went all the way out to Oregon, down to California and back. 33 states, 10,000 miles, 30 days. But we couldn't afford to stay in hotels and everything, so we tented. We had enough money for 3 hotels if it rained. Other than that, we tented the whole way. And I don't like tenting, but it's one of the greatest experiences we ever had. And I'll tell you, the memories you make on vacations with your kids or with your family or with your spouse are so important. Do it. It's much better than saying, I got to work one more week so I can get a little bit extra money. Take your vacations. Take a sabbatical. Take time off. Teachers and others have sabbaticals that are set up so they can take that time off and get rejuvenated. Do something different than you normally do. That's a way of getting that rest and that regeneration that you need. And then in Ecclesiastes 5:10 it says, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with its income. So if you're avoiding rest to get more money, it ain't going to work. More money is not going to make you happy. You need to get that straight. Take your rest. The fifth thing is a Christian never retires from God's work. In Numbers it talks about the only people in the Bible that really talks about retirement, and that's the Levites. They started when they were age 20, they went to the age 50, and then they never served again. That was their time. They retired. So there's not retirement for everybody else. And I'm not saying that I don't know too many pastors that started at 20 and retired at 50 either, but I'm saying that retirement is not a concept in the Bible. Who do you work for? Really? Yeah. Say it out loud. Who do you really work for? You never retire from working for God. When you retire from getting paid for a job and maybe you get a pension or maybe you don't need as much or you're on Social Security, what do? Continue to work for God. Maybe you're able to go on a missions trip and fund yourself. You don't have to worry about asking other people for money. And you can go overseas and do what you're doing. Maybe you're an engineer, or maybe you're an accountant, or maybe you're some other position that is useful. And you say, Pastor, can I use my talents someplace else? And they say, well, you know what? Let me check. And the Mission Society says, you know what? In Kenya, Africa, we've got a mission school, and the accountant, who is the treasurer, the accountant, has to come on deputation, furlough for 3 months, and they need somebody to do the books. Maybe you could go, because you're an accountant, you could spend your 3 months, because now you're retired, and go over there and spend 3 months and take care of that position. You use your talents and responsibilities in retirement. Maybe you have the ability to work with your hands and build things, and you're retired, or you get a vacation, you can take it with your family. Go with your family and do a mission trip. Go over and do something that you can do, if you can work with your hands or whatever. There's all kinds of opportunities. Christians never retire. There's a study done by a major university. They studied 265-year-old men who were graduates of the university. All of them had good health. They didn't have heart problems or anything else. They were checking out. They were all the same kind of health. They started them at age 65. They followed them through till they were age 75. At age 75, they then went back and checked the statistics on them. Of the group that had, some of them half of the group retired, and half of them kept doing their same job, didn't retire. Of the half that did retire, 6 out of 7 were dead by age 75. Of the half that did not retire but kept on working, 6 out of 7 were still alive. Wow. Good impetus for not retiring. Retiring, what are you going to do with it? If you don't need to go to your main work, find something else to do. Paul said his last words in 2 Timothy were, for I'm about already being poured out as a drink offering. And the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight. I have kept the faith. I have finished the course. He went to the very end, and so should we. Number 6, work mandates good stewardship of our income. It includes physical labor, mental labor, leadership, whatever. Perhaps you heard the story of the guy from the man who sent a $50 check into the IRS and because he couldn't sleep at night. And he said in his letter, I can't sleep at night. Here's $50 for the bill that I owe. If I still can't sleep, I'll send you the rest. We need to be good stewards of what our money is, whether it's the IRS, taxes, whether it's supporting God. And where are 3 of the places that believers give their funds? Well, as we look at it, first of all, it's to God. God owns it all. Psalm 24:1 says, the earth is the Lord and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it. God owns it all. So where do we give our resources? How do we help? Well, first of all, the local church. In 1 Corinthians 16:2, it says, on the first day of the week, every week, each of you should put aside and save as he has prospered, so that no collections will be made when I come. The church, the local church. And that's my starting place. I've always given 10% minimum to the church before I do anything else. That's where I start. Because God's only established 2 agencies or 2 institutions in the scriptures. One is the family or marriage, and the other is the church. And if because we are the church, right? If we cannot govern and send our money and use our money effectively for God, who can? So that's the first place I start. And then there's other ministries, other Christian ministries that you want to support. And then lastly, there's other believers or those in need. In Galatians 6, 9, and 10, I think Pastor Scott preached that particular passage. It said to help others who are in need, but especially those who are of the household of faith. So we need to help other believers. In Ephesians chapter 4, 28, it says, let him who steals steal no more, but rather let him labor, work, performing what with his own hands is good. Why? So he can have a lot of money, right? No. What's it say? What's it up there? In order that he may have something to share with him who has need. Giving to the needy is a part of what we do. Due to time, I'm not going to read the next phrases, but I've been reading a book called Revolution in Generosity. Let me just give you a few seconds and read these quotes. Do any of these quotes resound with you? Each one I just felt is so important. And one more slide. That last one really sticks out to me. Disciples are generous stewards, and generous stewards are disciples. Lordship of Jesus Christ and our finances go hand in hand. The last thing I want to share with you, the 7th principle, is we must teach our children about work and wages. In Ecclesiastes, the writer of Ecclesiastes said, thus I hated all the fruit of my labor for which I had labored under the sun, for I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool. Yet he will have control over all the fruit of my labor for which I have labored by acting wisely under the sun. This too is vanity. You won't be able to keep your funds. What are you going to do with your money after you're gone? What's going to happen to it? You're going to leave it all to your kids? If your kids are believers and going to use it properly, maybe that's okay. But if they're not, maybe you need to reconsider it. If you don't have children or you don't have those that you can trust to use it for God, because who owns it? God owns it. If you can't trust the people who are there, what are you going to do with it? My 7th principle is we must teach our children about work and wages. We must teach our children about work and wages. There's a movie trilogy that called The Ultimate Gift, The Ultimate Life, and The Ultimate Legacy. I've enjoyed watching those in the past, and I'm going to show you just a short scene from the middle one. Red Stevens was a guy who grew up in the Depression. As he grew up in the Depression area, he finally left home because his dad couldn't feed the family, and he figured one less mouth is good. He went on his own. He eventually was delivering stuff, and he saw an article about Andrew Carnegie, who earned all this money, became wealthy and so forth. He says, I'm going to become a billionaire, because that's what Andrew Carnegie did. He says, I'm going to become a billionaire. And he worked his life to do it. He finally wound up in Texas in oil, and eventually he wound up in a hotel on a Christmas Eve, waiting for the deal that would make him a billionaire, buying a refinery. His good and trusted friend, the lawyer, said, I'm going home to my family. He said, well, I'm going to stay here. This is going to make my billion. I'm going to stay and get this deal. Christmas morning, he got the deal. But when he called home, he found out that his friend, when he got home, had been in a car accident, and he was in a coma. He went to his friend's side and wound up giving him a liver because he needed that. And it changed his focus in life. And I'm going to pick it up right here, if you would, for just a couple of minutes, and just watch the end as he tries to have this revisioning of what he should do.
What's this all about, Dad?
Yeah, is this gonna take long?
Are you guys getting divorced?
No, that's not what this is about.
Well, what are we here for? You're kind of freaking me out.
That doesn't take much.
All right, that's enough.
Your father has something that he would like to say to you, so you will sit there with your mouths shut and listen. Go ahead, Red.
I wanted you kids here because, well, I want to apologize to you.
Apologize.
For what? For neglecting you over 2 decades. I made my work more important over you, and more important over your mom. I learned a lot of lessons along the way. But I ended up burying him in the pursuit of the almighty dollar.
Is there a bottom line here, Dad? I got a plane to catch back to Princeton.
Your mom and I decided we're going to start living life a little bit different. So, future profit from Panhandle Oil will go into a new fund that we started. We're going to start doing some good in the world. And we're going to stop living for ourselves. We're going to try to learn how to help others.
Tell me you're not giving our trust funds away to the poor or something.
I'm not giving your money away, son. In fact, your mother and I are going to give each of you $10,000 right now. Ruth?
For what?
For the chance to learn the gift of giving.
No strings attached?
We hope that you'll use this money to help others.
So are we done here? We can go?
Yeah, y'all can go.
That's a lot of money to spend.
All we can do is try and hope that their hearts change. It will take patience.
I've never been very patient.
Dad?
Yeah, Jay.
Here you go. I don't need it. Put it in the foundation.
You sure, son? This is your money.
I have enough.
What are we teaching our children? Are we good examples? What are we going to do with our funds for others in need? This morning's sermon says that the principle of work is in order to serve God and to provide for others. Serve God and provide for others. Which of these principles do you need to work on in your life? Any of them that you think you'd like to reinvigorate in your own person? Take a few seconds. I'm just going to, let's just bow your heads and pray, if you will, and just pick one and just pray to the Lord about it and see where you're at on that particular one. Dear Lord, as we have these principles up on the screen here, these 7 principles, we ask that you might help us to establish in our own lives the things that are important. We recognize that work and wages and money are the things that you've given us, and that's all yours. And today we remember the day in which you gave all for us. As we take of the bread, we ask that you might help us to remember the great sacrifice you made on behalf of us, that we might be able to go to heaven forever and be with you. In Jesus' name, amen.